Welcome to today's workshop on the AHRC PhD Studentships. This session is following our session on generally UKRI PhD Studentships, and we've already done a session on the ESRC studentship. If you've not seen that session, you can watch a recording of it on our YouTube channel. I'll send a link to it later. In today's session, I'll introduce you to Project EduAccess and to your panelists, who will then take you over what the AHRC studentships are, talk to you about DTPs, what the eligibility looks like, what is the application process, what does the timeline look like, selection process, give you some general tips on making an application, point you towards some resources, and then speak to you specifically about AHRC DTPs. And then we move to Q&A. We are Project EduAccess. We believe that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are systematically denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers. And we try to improve inclusivity in some of these spaces by removing these barriers for marginalized communities in the Global South. We do this by adopting 4 key interventions, such as mentoring, counseling, role modeling, information advice, guidance, capacity building, leadership skill development, and evidence-based advocacy. To help us do this, we have a network of wonderful mentors, 3 of whom have joined us today for this session. So we have with us Abdullah, who's at the Northumbria University on the AHRC Northern Bridge Consortium DTP. We have with us Shreya, who is doing a PhD jointly from University of Exeter and Ashmolean Museum and is on the AHRC Collaborative Doctoral PhD. And we have with us Hanzala, who's familiar with the applications of 2 DTPs, which is the first is the Northumbria University Northern Bridge Consortium DTP, and then the Southwestern Wales DTP. Our panelists can speak in English, Hindi, and Urdu. So if you want to ask your questions in any other language than English, feel free to do so. Thank you so much to the 3 of you for joining us today and for taking the time out to speak to our to the audience about the studentships. And Shreya, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ba. So I'm just going to do the introduction part to different DTPs. So they, like Ms. Ba said, they're part of the UK Research and Innovation body, which offers studentships to support doctoral students in different fields. They cover fees, living costs, and also provide other training opportunities that we'll get to in a minute. It's a non-departmental public body sponsored by Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They have like an annual budget through which they administer these different studentships and other sort of funding schemes. You basically apply through research organizations. In the UK, various organizations are given the status of independent research organizations, or IRO, and you don't apply directly to the UKRI or to the university. What the UKRI does instead is creates these group or cohorts of more than 2 universities, or a university and another heritage organization or an industry partner, which funds research students and creates groups or cohorts of sponsors. It's open to all prospective doctoral students, including international students, but there is a 30% limit on the intake that most DTPs have. Ms. Ba, can you go to the next slide? So today we're basically focusing on the Arts and Humanities Research Council within the UKRI. The others are sort of funding different subjects. Yeah, next slide. The Arts and Humanities Research Council, like the name suggests, basically is looking for funding PhD specifically in the arts and humanities disciplines in the UK. But this is sort of broadly interpreted, and you can have some PhDs that use data analysis methods and like quantitative methods, etc. But broadly speaking, your discipline would be an arts and humanities one. The stipend for 2024-2025 that they give is £19,237, and they cover the tuition fees at UK home rate. For international students, your university might be able to cover the difference in some cases, but this is not always the case. Additional funding is provided for research expenses, training, and travel. So for, say, archival work, for doing field work, things like that. Usually it's 3.5 years and can extend for certain particular DTPs. And you get the chance to do placements, which is a particularly attractive factor in some DTPs. Next slide. Like I said, what it covers is a fees, which means that neither home students nor international students have to pay the annual university tuition fees during the time that they're funded by these DTPs. These fees are paid directly by the AHRC to the university, and so you don't have to basically be involved in any of that. Then you get a tax-free maintenance stipend each month, and this is given like throughout the 12 months of the year that help you cover student living costs. For 2024-2025, it's at £19,000 per year, and those who have the universities based in London get an additional £2,000 per year, which is called the London Waiting Stipend. And this is because, of course, cost of living is higher in London than in other parts of the country, and it helps make up for that. There's also access to research training support funds. These differ from different DTPs, the exact amount that you administered, but a maximum of 4,000 over the lifetime of the studentship award might be given. And then sometimes you might have, sometimes you might have other funds for costs that are generated by research activities like fieldwork, language training, placements, international placements, things like that. Okay, so what are the DTPs or the doctoral training partnerships? They're basically collaborative training hubs that are funded by the AHRC. So the funding goes to the DTPs and they bring together universities and industry partners and, like cultural organizations or different universities together. So as I was saying earlier, there is no route for PhD students who are interested in getting funding to apply to the AHRC directly. What AHRC does is gives the funds to the universities and research organizations that you can then apply to. And they are basically the one who handle your administration during the time that you're part of the PhD process. The advertisement of opportunities and recruitment is thus managed by the Doctoral Training Partnership, the Center for Doctoral Training, or Collaborative Doctoral Partnership, and these administrations are based in different organizations. Like, for instance, the CDP scheme that I'm based on, their administration is handled by the Victoria and Albert Museum. So any student who is interested in being on an AHRC-funded PhD studentship should contact your research organization, university, or the consortium, that is the CDP, the DTP, or the CDT, to obtain any information about eligibility and application processes. These are some examples of the DTPs that are covered by AHRC: the Scottish Graduate School for Arts and Humanities, the Open Oxford Cambridge AHRC DTP, which is mostly for doing PhDs at Oxford or Cambridge, then the Consortium for Humanities and the Arts Southeast England, CHASE for short, London Arts and Humanities Partnership, Northwest Consortium Doctoral Training Partnership. So the Northwest one, as the name suggests, would be based on universities and research organizations in the northwest of the country. The Northern Bridge DTP, the Southwestern Wales DTP, again covers the southwest regions, so Bristol, Bath, University of Exeter, things like that regional focus. Then you have the Midlands one, the Techne, and then the White Rose College of Arts and Humanities. Each DTP basically has a particular key focus. This might be heritage, this might be science training, etc., although not for the AHRC. And they have this unique focus, which basically makes them, which gives them their USP across different years. So for eligibility, you definitely need a strong undergraduate degree and also a master's degree in arts, humanities, or related fields. Like I said earlier, sometimes there are projects which have focus on data analysis or quantitative methods, which might have overlaps with other fields. And the AHRC is increasingly trying to be more interdisciplinary, so other skills might be applicable here. But you need to have a background that makes you, that gives you equips you with the skills to be able to do an arts and humanities based degree. In most cases, you also submit a well-defined and original research project and a research proposal, which aligns with the DTP theme. So when you're making this proposal, you can check what the particular DTP that you're applying to, their research focus areas are, and tailor your application that way. Other skills and competencies that you need is critical thinking and academic writing, which are basically applicable to any other PhD, demonstrated ability to conduct independent research, and like I was saying, interdisciplinary interest is encouraged, but this is not compulsory. Language proficiency for international students is needed. You need to have IELTS, TOEFL, etc. if applicable. And although this is open to UK and international students, there is a 30% cap at international students that each DTP takes. I think I'll now hand over to Abdullah to take you through the application process.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So the application process for applying to DTPs are majorly similar throughout. So I've had the privilege of applying to out of the 10 consortiums that there are, six of them. So I know by large that the application process remains almost similar throughout. There are some differences. I'll go over the differences as well later on. But majorly, the way you can divide the application process in the technical bit of it and the compulsory bit of it, and you can also make notes of this so that you understand what kind of things that you are taking off. In the technical bit of things, as Shreya just told you in the eligibility section, you are looking into things like you should have your academic documents at the ready when you're starting with the whole process. You should have your transcripts ready, you should have your degrees ready, and you should possibly also to make the process easier, have applied for a passport or have a passport beforehand, so that will make your process easier on the technical bit of things. You should have a well-made CV. We can also share with you a CV template of what we have used, if that is something you all would need. That is taking care of the technical bit of things. And even with IELTS, what I suggest is having a score in which the writing component of it is focused to be around 7 when you're especially applying for a PhD. It helps you in the process even later on, in being able to get some things like teaching and stuff later on, and just makes your process easier. You don't have to, you don't feel like because of one technical requirement, you're left to apply to some universities or consortium. So that's taking care of the technical bit. On the compulsory side of things, your main document is going to be a research proposal. And I'm going to make this in a comparative way. I don't know how many of you might have applied for a master's program in the UK before, but when you're applying for a master's program in the UK, your statement of purpose becomes like 60% of your application. You're editing that, you're making it the best it is. But when you're applying for a PhD, a statement of purpose becomes like 10% of the whole application, or 20% at best, because your research proposal and how that is developed and written is going to make up 60 to 70% of your proposal, and then obviously your CV comes into play. So how do you begin with the process? First of all, you should have a certain understanding of the topic that you're interested in. And though I would love to say that any and every topic would work, what actually works to gain funding would rather be a topic that has some impact on ground, or has some social impact, be it in your own country. Of course, if it's in your own country, it's going to play an advantage to you, or if it could be to a larger context, or even an impact on the discipline that you're applying to itself. So that should be a very important goal. The second is writing the research proposal itself. So again, in that, I'll be happy to share with you my own, among others, if that's possible, so that you can get a sense of the structure of the proposal that you need to write, because the structure makes an important part, because you might know your idea very well, but you don't know how to place it into the structure. So that's the other bit. The second part is going to be obviously choosing your university. So what I found helpful, and I've known a few people as well for whom this is helpful, is having an Excel sheet in which you have divided the university. So each consortium has a number of universities. For most of them, it varies between 6 to 8 universities per consortium, and a few of them have only 3 or 4. Making the list of those universities in an Excel sheet, going to the department pages of each of those, and seeing which supervisor meets your research interests and your topic. That's going to be the second most important bit of the process. And once you have your research proposal to a certain degree, based on the structure of, you think, this is appropriate, this looks well written for someone to be interested in reading, this has some social impact as well, and you have your universities, you have these potential supervisors shortlisted, it's time to send out the people to these potential supervisors your research proposal. Misbah, could you go to the next slide? As you can see here, the application process is divided into 2 bits. You first make an application to the university itself, and in some cases, the university nominates you directly, and in other processes, you're applying via the application portals of these DTPs, and but the nomination is still happening in the background by the university, even if you make a separate application. Not for you to not be confused, a higher education institute generally just means the university here. And HEI is, and non-HEI would be like a partner organization like Shreya is working with. So you divide your process into 2 of these parts. And just to reiterate, you begin with a research proposal. You have your academic documents ready. You begin with writing your research proposal. You're confident enough to send it across to supervisors. You have a list of the universities, you have a list of potential supervisors, and you send that across. After the supervisors get back to you with interest that they would like to be a primary supervisor or secondary supervisor, you move to the next part. You're developing the research proposal with your supervisor so that it can be the best version of that research proposal. Now, this is where certain differences come. With every consortium, one of the most important differences is the word limit of the research proposal. You might begin with 2,000 words. Some DTPs require you to have a 1,500 word research proposal, a 1,200 word research proposal, or 1,000 or a 750 word research proposal. That will differ. You don't have to worry a lot about that. Once you are at this part of the process, things tend to naturally develop because you're in contact with the supervisor and you know what kind of bits you need to change, and they will be very helpful in most cases. And now that you have your proposal developed with your supervisor, you move on to applying to the universities. Now, in some cases where I said, the university nominates you, you make an application according to the timeline. Mizo, could you move to the timeline slide now? Yeah. Just to give you your general overview, which applies almost throughout the consortiums, September to November is when you are looking at the programs and supervisors, and you're also developing a research proposal by yourself, obviously. And this is, we are in November right now. This is the timeline around which you should have sent a research proposal to certain supervisors. If you have a research proposal, even right now, if you're confident, it's not too late to send it. Of course, I will urge you to hurry it up and send it to potential supervisors, make a list of those. And then in December, you're looking at applying to the universities. And with some of them, you're developing the proposal and the whole application in a holistic manner, so that you kind of are applying to the DTP also, on your part at least, even if the deadline for the DTP might be later, for the university it might be earlier. I'll tell you the difference, some differences about where you're applying to the university in collaboration with also applying to the consortium, and where you're doing it separately for the portal. So just looking at the timeline, September to November is looking at the programs and supervisors. December is when you apply to the universities. December to January generally is the timeline in which you have the deadlines for the consortium portals, for the DTP portals. Feb to March is shortlisting and interviews. Generally, the interviews for most of these are conducted by the university, not by the consortium or the panel at the consortium. March to April is generally when you get the decisions and offer acceptance, and September, October is when your program begins. If you can move to the next slide. These are some of the very technical bits of what makes your proposal really, it just makes it the best it can be. And your selection is based on these four criteria, which have these marking of 1 to 5 scale. Your academic and professional experience is just your CV, that you what kind of person you have been throughout, what kind of research experience you have. That will let the panel know the research readiness. Now, why is research readiness so important in the UK? Well, you will see, in India, we have generally a PhD of 3 to 5 years. Even when you have a NET or JRF or whatever, the funding is extended up to 5 years. In the UK, generally that funding is from 3 to 4 years. And to give you a good comparison, in the US, your PhD can be anywhere between 6 to 7 years. So in the UK, because of the small timeline of 3 to 4 years, they expect you to have a certain research caliber before you can begin with your project. And you're also not having any kind of coursework as such. Obviously, you will have training, which mostly you choose to do at your own will. You're trying to see what kind of training you personally need than them telling you. So that research readiness is something that they're looking for a lot. So it will be nice if you have some conferences that you've presented papers at, if you have any training that you've done at your home institution in India, if you have certain papers published or articles published, or a good academic score is also something that helps you. Aptitude and potential also is on the similar lines. That is, yet again, do you have the potential to do a PhD? And there are many criteria through which they kind of understand this. Your research proposal, yet again, is the most important part. How impactful is your research proposal? How important is it in today's time to be funded or not? And yet again, does it look like a research proposal which can be completed in a certain timeline of 3 to 4 years is also very important. You're not aiming too high and you're not aiming too low. It's something that that is something also you develop with your supervisor. And planning for knowledge exchange and impact is another part where you're trying to see where your project could be interdisciplinary. It could go across institutions and things like that. Moving to the next slide. Yeah, so we've talked about most of these things. What kind of documents you require, and then that you're nominated by the university, and how their assessment on the DTP level. You have shortlisting and interviews. We can talk about the interviews also in a separate way, or we can do it at the end when you have questions, if you have any regarding that. And yeah, so just to give you a sense of how the parameters look, can you move to the next slide? Yes, so this is how the descriptors kind of look for it. This is something that technically you're not looking at when you're applying. This is, not something you're trying to place yourself as where you stand. But this is just to kind of give you an overview of what they're looking at. So a quick glance at it is what I would suggest you to do, not something to be worried about and focus on, okay, I need to fit on all these criteria somehow, because in a way, technically, you cannot assess yourself to the extent to know that you fit all the criteria or no, or not. But yeah, just this is a good idea of how the descriptors kind of look. Uh, can you move to the next slide? All right. Hanzala, would you like to take it from here?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Abdullah. I think you've covered generally most of the points that are important in an individual project. So thank you for that. And I think I'll just talk generally about how my experience was with the AHRC and maybe some of the points, some of the technical bits as well. So when we're talking about the AHRC DTPs, we are talking about really prestigious scholarships. And I think, like Abdullah mentioned many times, the research proposal is what you have to kind of focus on the most. It is the most important part of your project. And whenever you're applying for an AHRC or a DTP, I think the research proposal is something that has to be in mind at all times. For me, I kind of divided the entire process in 3 bits. So the first step would be finding your supervisor and contacting them and getting their approval as to your project is viable or not. So that's the first step. The second step would be the university application process, where basically you apply officially to the university. You will have to have several documents for that, as has been mentioned. And the third step finally is the DTP. And so for the DTPs, for some DTPs, you apply through the university. So the university basically nominates your project. If they find your project to be viable for a DTP, they send your basically your application to the DTP. And the other kind of DTP where you basically have to apply separately through the DTP website. And so I think we have given a list of all the DTPs, and you can go through these DTPs just to have a general understanding of how basically they work. But I think, again, the most important thing for you right now would be to find supervisors and to send your research proposals over to them so that they can accept them, and then you can move forward to the university application process. I think I will just give you a general tip for finding supervisors, potential supervisors. Basically, you can go through all the universities in the particular DTPs. I think there would be somewhere around 50 to 60 universities in all of England which kind of get this grant for the DTPs through the HRC. So you can go through all the universities, and this does take a bit of time, but when you have a research proposal in mind, when you have a research area, you can basically go through these universities and the list of the staff, the academic staff, and you kind of look for your kind of research areas. And you, like Abdullah also mentioned this, having a Excel sheet is a really good idea so that you can basically kind of keep a track of all the potential supervisors that you have. So that would be a really good, helpful point for you. You keep a track of all the potential supervisors in one place. When you have your proposal ready, you send it over to them. And when a supervisor kind of sees that your project has some viability, they basically interact with you and they help make your proposal better. So you don't really have to worry about the particulars of the AHRC and the DTPs, because the supervisors will always be there with you if they have agreed to be your supervisor. And so they help make your proposal even better. The other thing, other technical point that I'd like to mention is the LORs. So for the LORs, there is a difference, and I think most people kind of forget this because for the masters, it's usually different. So for the LORs and masters, what happens is usually you basically have a PDF of your LOR and you just upload it. But in many places in PhDs, what they do is basically this ask you an email of your potential referee, and basically they send an email to the referee with a link, and they have to open that link and upload the LOR onto there. And so what happens is, so if you have got quite a few universities, it can be a bit of long process for the referee. So what I would suggest is you talk to basically a few professors of yours and have them ready, so that if you have a few universities, maybe 5 or 6 universities, it's not a burden on a single referee that they have to kind of open link and put the LOR in accordance to the kind of format. And also, you may possibly have to upload LORs twice, once for the university application process itself, and the other for the DTP itself. So you have to keep in mind that it may be a burden for the referee, for your referee. So it's good to have several referees than a single one. The other point that I would like to make is for the specific university resources that you have to kind of understand. So when you're applying for an AHRC, they really need to understand why you want to do your project at this particular place. That is also a question that you have to kind of keep in mind. Obviously, this is for a later stage when you have had an offer letter possibly from the university, and then you're applying for the DTP. This is also something your supervisor will be able to help, but this is also something that you should keep in mind. For example, if you're doing a South Asian research, for example, there are particular consortiums that are better for that because they have resources in that consortium that focus on the South Asian research. So you should have a slight understanding at least of what consortiums are working with, what organizations, what kind of non-HEI partners, so that you had a better understanding of where your project will be more viable. Could you go to the next point, please? Yeah, so I think when we are talking about your CV as well, I think that comes into play a lot. Back in India, I think when we talk about, especially when we talk about taking a gap after your studies and coming back to the PhD, having a professional break or something, I think most of the times that isn't really helpful. But here, I think you have to keep in mind that any kind of professional training or any kind of organizational work that you have done, any kind of training, courses, anything that you have done may be really helpful for your DTP application process. So you have to keep in mind that you have to mention whatever is necessary for you and helpful for you in that process. And your CV, I think we can also share some resources on CV. But you can mention these things, your field work, and how these can become helpful in your sort of the DTP process. Sorry. Yeah, so I think we'll go to the next slide. So these are some of the resources that are available for you. So you've got, obviously, the UKRI website mentions all of the DTPs in detail. And when you go to these websites, you can particularly go to a particular DTP where you can see all the universities involved. And you can also see what kind of research areas and non-HEI partners they are involved with, so that you can better understand where your project will basically apply better. The second is Find a PhD. This is basically a website where you can find collaborative doctoral projects about which Shreya will talk in detail. Just to make it clear, again, Abdullah and I have been talking about individual projects. So there are two kinds of projects: individual projects, open projects, where you basically make a research proposal and apply it to the university, etc. And there are other CDAs, collaborative doctoral projects, where, like Shreya will talk about, where you basically have an advertisement and you apply for them directly. These are the DTP websites, and I think these resources will be really important for you to go through once so you can understand better. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we have the AHRC collaborative doctoral PhDs, and Shreya will talk about these more. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hanzala. So I just wanted to touch very briefly on this CDP scheme because it differs a little bit, like Hanzala was just saying, from the way.
I'm so sorry, Shreya.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
to add, when you're done with your bit, I think just now when Hanzala was talking, I realized, we're going through our own process of how we applied can also help in answering a lot of questions, because there was quite a few things that I remembered, that just talking about our own experience is going to help. So I think once you're done with your bit, talking about our own project and how we applied and what kind of things that we feel individually, subjectively could be better, is something that we could do. So yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I'll try to talk about mine during the application slide as well. Yeah. Okay, so the collaborative doctoral PhDs are basically organized in collaboration with a heritage organization. That is, it could be a museum, a library, or an archive, broadly defined. These could include big national UK museums like the Victoria and Albert Museum, the British Museum, National Gallery, but also research organizations like the National Archives, British Library, and National Trust. Sometimes you can work with local organizations, for instance, Bradford Galleries, Leeds Museums. Most cities in the UK will have a museum or a gallery or a library which sort of might have applied to the CDP and have research funding for you to apply to. And it can also include private archives like the British Telecommunication Archives. I've included a link here of all the research organizations that the CDP scheme covers, and you can have a look at that. The key aspect, as the name suggests, is basically collaboration. So you're based both at the university and the heritage organization, and you have two supervisors. One from the host university that you're based at, and one from the partner organization. And you can also have more than two. Currently, I have 4, but I would not recommend that. And topics again have an emphasis increasingly these days on marginalized histories, on underrepresented collections, which is where the emphasis on BAME candidates and people from South Asia is quite, it fits in quite well. So if you are interested in sort of decolonization, if you're interested in talking about hidden histories, this is a very good scheme for you to apply to. So you're expected to spend time both at the partner organization and your university, but everyone approaches it differently according to their needs and their location. For instance, I am based at Exeter, but my partner organization, which is the Ashmolean, is in Oxford. I sometimes travel up to Oxford to do research, but I'm not based there. Some people are based where their partner organization is. Like, for instance, if you are working with the British Museum, you might just live in London and not where your university is, say in Exeter or Bristol or anywhere else in the country. The AHRC CDP scheme does give you a little bit of funding to be able to commute between your partner organization and host university, but it will differ again from your partner organization's budget, and according to the distance between the two places. Like I was saying, the project has an emphasis on marginalized histories, and you basically work on the collections of your partner organization. So I look at the coins that are at the Ashmolean. Somebody might be looking at archives that are based at the National Archives. Somebody might be looking at manuscripts at the British Library and using them for their own research. So you produce a thesis which is based on this collection, and the idea is that your research then feeds back to your partner organization, which is what makes this scheme particularly attractive both for the heritage organizations and for you to gain work experience. Some training is also provided by the CDP group itself, the administration that administers it. So you might have study days at archives and libraries. You might have career events with curators and academics and people who've worked at the CDP scheme before, like with CDP alumni. That helps you get some training. And the CDP group is now becoming bigger and bigger. So you have access to a great network of people, people who have been curators, people who've been researchers, conservators. And this network, I think, is a very attractive part of the scheme because they're very supportive and they share opportunities with each other, and you listen to each other's works and might get chance to work on people's exhibitions, things like that through this network. So in terms of timeline, it is usually 3.5 years with 6 months set aside for placements. The placements are not compulsory, so you can also just do your research for 4 years. But most people like to take this placement option, especially if you're looking for a heritage career in the future. They're really valuable. The way this works is that you can either design your own project with an organization that you have in relationship with, or you can do placements which are pre-advertised by certain museums. Like the VNA runs placement scheme every year, which is specifically for CDP students, and so does the British Library. I did both types of projects. So for 3 months, I worked at the Ashmolean with my supervisor. So this was a project in which I already had a relationship with my partner organization. And I worked on the exhibition that is now open at the Ashmolean, working on their catalog, doing research on objects, etc. And the second placement I did was one which was advertised by the VNA. So it was a provenance placement project with their Asian art department. And I worked there for 3 months on their collections. But this was a project that I basically applied to. Ms. Pa, can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so going through the application process, like we were just discussing, the application process for CDPs is very slightly different. The subject matter is already agreed between the partner organization and the university. Like I said, because it's based on the collections of the heritage organization, people from that organization know what is the area in their collections that they need more research on. And they usually get in touch with a university professor who also works on the area. And this all happens behind the scene. This is nothing you have to worry about. They together design a research project and they apply to the AHRC to get a grant. And once that grant is approved, they basically recruit the best qualified student to undertake that research, i.e. all of us. So you apply to pre-designed projects. Applications call are shared on websites of the university and partner organization, but also sites like Find a PhD that we were just talking about, as well as shared on social media sites. So I would say definitely keep an eye out on your LinkedIn, on your Twitter. I found my PhD through Twitter. So I would definitely say that, if you follow research organizations, museums, famous curators, historians, you might see them retweeting or sharing these posts or putting them on their LinkedIn. So keep an eye out for that. But I've also included the website on which that they are officially listed. This one is obviously out of date now, but for the next year, I'm sure they will put their advertisements again. The timeline for the CDPs are a little bit late. So if you're starting in October of 2025, the advertisements will come out only in April. So there is plenty of time. And you can basically do this, once, if, for instance, your other PhD schemes have not worked out, you have time in April to basically look at the advertised projects and apply to them. You go through the list, see what is particularly well suited to your subject area and interests, and you make your application to that particular project. Some projects might let you start in the January of next year. So instead of October 2025, you might be able to start in January 2026, but that's to be worked out with your university. I have to say that because they're pre-designed projects, you're not going to get exactly what you want to research. You have to just see what's the best out of the lot, and sometimes it might work exactly according to what you're interested in. Sometimes you might have to switch gears, but that's a decision up to you whether you want to do that. I did that, for instance, because in my master's I had worked on Mughal history, and I thought that's what I wanted to do in my PhD, but because I saw this CDP scheme which had the collaborative aspect, which had a museums focus, and I wanted to work in a heritage sector in the future, I applied to the project even though it's colonial collecting history and coins, which I had never worked on before. I would say that this AHRC CDP website is not always reliable. They're not very good at keeping it up to date. So definitely keep Find a PhD and your university and partner organizations in mind. Different projects in terms of application will look at different skill sets. Like some might have a conservation focus, so you might have that training. Some might want you to do network visualization or quantitative methods, but and you can tailor sort of your CV and SOP according to that. But usually you submit a CV, an SOP, a writing sample, and two to three references. Some projects may require a research proposal, but this differs, and this is exactly where it differs in application process from what we've been talking about before. So I did not have to submit a research proposal because, like I said, the research proposal is already designed by the partner organization and university. What they're basically seeing is like who's the best person to undertake this proposal. In many ways, it's like applying to a job. You know what the job is, and you don't have to decide the parameters of the job. You just have to show that you're well suited for the job. So you submit this application, I think in June. May to June is usually the deadline. And then you have an interview with your supervisors and the CDP admin once you're shortlisted, and that's it. And then you get recruited to the PhD. In terms of impact, it is really useful for those interested in careers in heritage. It gives you great heritage-based experience, especially because you're collaborating with a heritage organization. And also, if you really take up the opportunity of doing placements, then it gives you good experience. These are just some stats, although a little bit outdated. 48% of CDPs end up working in the heritage sector. And there's a detailed report, if you're interested, in this link about what are the kind of people who take up this CDP scheme, what are the careers they go on to do. The fun thing about the CDP scheme is that it tends to be leaning towards more mature students, and also it has more representation of women as compared to men in its intake. So that's a positive thing. I'm just thinking if I need to add something else. Yeah, that's it. I mean, if you have any questions about the CDP scheme, we can take it up in the Q&A.
Yeah, just before we go to questions, I'd just like to add another point. I'll just put it in the chat. There's this website, jobs.ac.uk. I think that is also a really helpful resource. I've put it in the chat, and I think you get a lot of CDAs as well as other opportunities, PhD opportunities on there. So I think you should always keep a check on this website.
Great. Thank you, Hanzala. I know, Abdullah, you were mentioning maybe you want to
Yeah.
talk about the application process that you went through. So if you want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So, uh, first of all, just to take you through a journey, all right, that will kind of explain to you how you can develop a good application, just because we've gone through it and kind of have some pointers as to what could make it. In the technical aspect of an SOP and an LOR, Angela mentioned very nicely how, in the application process, specifically for the scholarships, you might require the referees to have it uploaded for you. So, have a good relationship with your, referees. That's very important, keep in touch with them, and, you're going to be nagging them a lot. So that's important. But what I found helpful in developing the LOR and SOP is kind of like having a story. Your story needs to be weaved out very nicely. So your LOR and your SOP needs to speak about different aspects about your life. So what I found helpful was when I have two LORs and an SOP that I have to write. One of the LORs, which and yes, this is also important. A lot of the institutions and the DTPs will require that one of your LORs is from your supervisors from your master. So because that person technically would have known you the best. So let's say if I have an LOR from my supervisor who was in my masters, I would have that LOR in a way tailored that it speaks mostly about my academic achievements. Right, it kind of speaks about my grades, about the papers that I have had published, about the conferences, and your referees will ask you of your CV and pointers that you would also like for it to be included. It's not just completely what they are writing. They also would because they're trying to recommend you and they might miss out some points. So they kind of ask you. So it's good to tell them what you would like it to be tailored around. Another LOR could talk about more of your extracurricular activities that you might have done, your literary events that you might have gone into, or you might have volunteered at, or organized at, or workshops or seminars or conferences you might have organized, and just talking about you in a non-academic way is also going to be important. So if I'm reading two of your LORs, I get to know two aspects of your life. And your SOP is more of a personal thing, where you're also talking about why you're doing a project, why this project, and also just how your academic journey has been, and bits of your personal experiences as well if you're faced any difficulties. So it's kind of like again, just a small novel that you're reading of a person's life. And so try to have different parts of it covered. So, a lot of people have LORs and SOPs which have very coinciding elements. It talks about academic achievements through and through, the two LORs and the SOP. Try not to have that. Try to have different things being spoken out throughout. So that's one thing that I found helpful in my process. Have a very good, well structured CV. It should be appealing. An academic CV is generally not with colors and in tabular formats or nothing like that. It's supposed to be very formal in a very sophisticated way. So again, we can give you a template of that as well. So it reads well, it talks about things in a very structured format. So that's going to be very important as well. And yes, things when you're doing in your bachelor's and master's, if you're still in your master's, try to keep up a good score. These are things that will obviously add on to what makes you a better fit for the person, as a researcher. So that's like my bit on the technical side of thing. Another is the project. Through just a few months, I've had people come in contact, and one question that I get asked is, what kind of topic is trending in the UK that I should be working on for a PhD? This kind of question is very difficult to answer, because there is no one way to answer that. There is no trending topic. I could go about in a very general manner and say, if you're going to work on Shakespeare, it probably will not get funded, you know. But that also might not be true. You might be able to bring out some very unique aspect of working, let's say, in a topic like Shakespeare, which has been worked on, or something in the Indian aspect, which I think, when if Hanzala is going to talk about in a bit about his own project, you'll understand, you can bring out unique things within a project, and that will work. So just say answering something like, work in the medical humanities or environmental humanities or AI answer. This is not an answer that one can give, and it's something that you should be doing. Because a research proposal, when you're writing it from your end, is supposed to be something very passionate. All right, it's supposed to be something that actually you feel with, and it's not just for the sake of it. So that's very important. You will see that projects kind of develop out of your own experiences. So, for example, my own project looks at comics and graphic novels in India, and it's looking at how the comics and graphic novels in India can act as a genre that could possibly rectify the images of Muslims and other marginalized communities that have been distorted by popular media like films and news. Here the most important bit is how this will impact marginalized communities. And just talking about it is not enough. My own experiences have shaped my proposal. You kind of understand. I hope you understand what that means. You cannot just talk about something for the sake of it, is what I'm trying to say. And you cannot just pick and choose topics because you feel it's certainly something in the trend. Like, for example, Shreya said, for her to apply into a Syria, she already had a background where she's working in Mughal history and in history in general. So it's not just coming out of the blue. So that's kind of something that's very important to have in mind. um, I think yeah, that is those are two things. And just one small bit, we've kind of talked this about before, but in a comparative way of when we have applied to different DTPs. Just giving you sort of an example. So for example, Techne and NBC, of which I got through with, they have sort of a similar process, where you are making application to the university, and they have a form that they will provide you with, and you fill the form in accordance to the timeline of the university, and then they send that form as nomination. So that's one distinction. For something like Chase or SWDTP, the process would be where you have applied to the university, you're waiting for an offer letter. You don't need an offer letter. This is also very important. You don't need an offer letter before you apply to the certain application portals. and you apply to the application portals separately. So they have certain tabs within those portals where you're filling sections like, research preparedness, and just general bits of about what kind of training you might need, or what kind of training you have already got, things like that. And there will be one section where it's written as put in your supervisor. So you put in your supervisor's name and email, and that section gets logged. Now the portal sends an email to the potential supervisor, and they fill out their bit. And once you're done with the form, the final submit is done by the university yet again. So these are kind of two variations of how the DTP functions. And also, as I mentioned before, the length of the research proposal is something that's going to be majorly changed throughout. Yeah. Hanzala, I think if you would like to talk about your project and your journey, that would be nice.
Firstly, if you have any questions, you can ask here. There's no issue. If not, I've given my details. I think the others can also give their details if they want. You can contact anytime. There's no issue with that. Because from a personal experience, this is quite an arduous process. I mean, there's 8 or 9 months of like the whole process. It's starting in September or October and it ending in say March or April. So it's quite a long process, and it gets it gives quite anxiety at times. But I think just like having this idea that there are others with you who are doing this and others who have done it is kind of helpful. I'll just talk a little bit about two things. The first is IELTS. I would suggest you not to worry about IELTS in the beginning. I think it's something that you can leave for later, especially if you are coming from an English background. I think many a times you can also get a waiver for IELTS. So I would not suggest that IELTS is the first thing that you should worry about. The other thing is, when we're talking about the research proposal itself, I hope that all of you have already started on your research proposals, and some of you might have even contacted your potential supervisors. But I just say that I think there are 2 points that I would kind of focus on the most. The first is the literary review, and the second is the methodology. I think these kind of focus most of your project in a better manner. I think there are some questions. Misbah, would you like to read them or should I read them?
Yeah, so if both of you don't have anything more to add, then maybe I can start taking the questions. I know we're all
Yeah, absolutely.
at the 1 hour limit, so we'll keep this quick. Yeah, so if people have questions, you can put them in chat. If you want to raise your hand, you can also directly ask the question to the panelists, or you can send it as a DM to either me or any one of the panelists here. So I'll read out the first question. I have some confusion regarding contacting the supervisor. When you have your own research area and interest and you want to contact a supervisor, do you directly send a proposal that you've been working on, or pitch your research interest, focus, and scope, or general applications, and then from their point you start working on the proposal you actually submit to the DTP schedule and of course the institution? Is there any specific way of pitching the proposal? Like in STEM, it has different bits of aims, research methods, etc.
Abdullah, do you want to take this question or should I take it?
It's all right. Yeah. I mean, generally, you should have a research proposal when you're applying. You don't contact them to with your kind of focus and your aims and scope, and then you develop the proposal. You should have a general proposal, if not a complete full-fledged proposal, when you're sending out to the potential supervisors. And yes, generally, it has a structure, a research context, a research methodology, and research questions is generally how it looks. And when you're writing your first one, I would suggest it to be around 1500 words, because you'll be only shortening it from there. But yes, have a proposal written before you send it across.
Just a general pointer, if you are sending an email to your potential supervisors, keep it as brief, as concise, as simple as possible, because these are academics and they are really busy. So just a greeting, a little bit, 1 line or 2 line about yourself, where you're coming from, what your university is, just 1 line or 2 line. And in another paragraph, just 1 or 2 line about your project, and just say that I'm attaching my research proposal in this email, and that's it. Like, keep it
Exactly.
precise, keep it simple. As you have also asked, is there a specific way of pitching the proposal? I think you can go on university websites, and most university websites, when you go into the department itself, they have a format. And I'd say you can pick any format from any good university, Cambridge, Oxford, any one of them, and they have a format. And basically, you can make a research proposal according to it, because you will have to tweak it a little bit according to each application. But in general, you should have one research proposal that kind of covers all the points. Like Abdullah mentioned, there's a methodology is very important, research questions, your literary context. So just have a one main proposal.
A good thing about the email body, because I think when I was first applying and sending across emails, I think a couple of places where I didn't get back was because I sent out very big emails to them. So that is very important to keep it short and precise, because I think your work will speak for you rather than you speaking a lot.
Great. There's another question that I'll just read out. My question is on collaborative PhD studentships within two institutions. For example, if one institution is Durham, which comes under 9 DTP, another institute in India. In this case, what should my DTP application for sure reflect for securing funding in terms of rationale? Might be subjective as well, but any suggestions or tips are welcome.
Is this about the collaborative, like the CDP scheme? Because from my understanding, the CDP scheme doesn't partner with, I mean, institutions outside the UK. It's usually UK-based independent research organizations, so university and a UK-based heritage organization. But I don't know if the other DTPs do that, Abdullah and Hanzala.
I think if you want to work with the particular institutions that you already have in mind, I think you'll have to go through the open route of applications, because, like Shreya mentioned, for the CDPs, they already have a kind of a research
Structure in place.
idea,
Yeah.
research proposal ready.
Proposal, yeah.
Yeah, they also have their partners also mentioned there. So it's
Yeah.
not something that you may be able to change after that.
And you mentioned, another institute in India. I don't think that is available in any of the DTPs, as far as I know. It's within the UK.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Any other questions?
There was one primary and secondary bibliography in proposal. I guess you kind of are suggesting about the bibliography at the end that you have. Yes, you need to put in. So, a good part of your research proposal is literature review. Kind of situating your work within a larger context is something that's going to be very important. Just as when you write a research paper, you have in-text citations. You do that here as well, and you put that at the end of the bibliography. Primary and secondary, I suppose, would mean a primary corpus of work and a secondary reading of it. Yes, all of those are included as well. So, good question. And yes, we will send you a CV template. I'll send you mine, of course, and Hanzala and Shreya could also hopefully send you theirs, and you could see the similarity and choose which one you would like to. I think that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think we've covered.
If anyone has
Yeah.
any questions you want to ask by raising your hand or something like that.
Yeah, and I think even later on, I think because when you go through this process, there are questions that come up later
Yeah,
on. You can contact if you want. Yeah.
definitely.
yeah. Yeah, I'm also checking if I have any questions in my DM. There's one question, sorry, I missed that. They're asking, how do we know if if the university is going to cover the remaining tuition fees?
Okay, I
Um.
can,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shreya.
just a bit quickly. I mean, usually when you look at the advertisement, they have already mentioned in most cases, at least in the CDP scheme, if they cover the international tuition fees. For instance, if you're on findaphd.com, usually they have a section on funding which very clearly lists that. Some universities have this policy in mind, like for instance, Exeter, where I am, already has this policy that for international students who are covered by research councils like the AHRC, they will cover the difference between the home fees and the tuition fees. Yeah, that's it.
I think it's the same for Northumbria as well. And generally, I don't think you will find a case. I have not found one case where this is not what happens. Either the DTP covers it completely, or the home institution covers the difference. It's generally kind of understood. I would be surprised if you would find a case otherwise.
Yeah, just another point briefly. If you do get this funding, you do not have to worry about, because got these questions in my personal chat before. So you don't have to worry about kind of having any other expenses over here. So these can cover your living costs pretty well. You just have to think about the cost before coming here. So you've got the visa cost, you've got the IHS cost and all, but I think these are questions that are much later, so you don't have to worry about these right now.
You got
Misbah, I think we have two
Yeah,
questions.
Yeah, I was just checking that. I'll just read them out. So the first question is, in our research proposal, should we broaden our scope of data collection to not just India, but also to UK, for instance, as a comparative studies or so, or can we just include Indian region in our research as that's what one is most familiar with?
So I think I'll just answer this quickly. It completely depends on your particular research, and it is completely subjective. So it does not matter if you want data collection in the UK or India, or how it is, but I would suggest that you firstly start with the UK kind of a based data collection if you have that in mind, because it'll be easier kind of in a feasible manner. Because for example, my project has data collection both in India and in the UK. So I'm working with something where I have focus groups, and I want to set up focus groups in the UK as well as India. So it's completely subjective, and I don't think you have to think according to AHRC or funding process. This does not will not deter anything in your application.
I
Yeah,
would
and
add that,
yeah,
sorry, for CDP schemes, they're usually designed in a way that the archives and collections are, like I said, with your partner organization, or at least based in the UK, because, well, that's the key aspect of the PhD. But even then, for instance, I've done fieldwork in India, even though all the coin collections that I work with are in the UK. I think it only strengthens your application if you have a scope to work in both places. But I think the key to the research proposal is showing viability, that it's feasible to look at these archives, that archives do exist for you to take the research that you want to take. If there are, for instance, no sources that you can identify, then the strength of your research proposal basically reduces.
yeah. Hanzala and Shreya have covered everything with this question. Just one thing, even if you're worried about funding for the research trips back to India to do any of that is also covered. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so someone has a question regarding the visa application expenses. Yes, you are right. It goes around 5 lakh almost. It is, yes, your first, this is the only kind of big expense that you have in the beginning. You have generally around 50,000 to 54,000 is for your visa and your IHS, because your IHS is covered for 4 years almost, goes up to, I think, almost 4 lakh rupees. So yes, it goes above. Yeah, yeah. So it comes to 4.5 almost, and then obviously with the
You've
tickets and
got
everything.
the
Yeah,
flight tickets as well. So I
yeah,
think this is one kind of big expense that you have before arriving to the UK.
yeah.
But once you arrive, I think the studentship actually starts before you actually arrive. So it's on the
Yes,
25th.
yes, yes, it
But
does.
yeah, this is one of the big expenses that you have to keep in mind, and they will not kind of fund this.
Yeah,
You have
and
to
it's something that it is a big expense in terms of just India. But I'm telling you, when you hear and when you have a funding I'm telling you, this will feel like a very small expense to you, and it will not be something you'll be worried about, even if you take a loan, just to say it from a very personal perspective as well, also, if that happens ever.
I would add that in the CDP, they don't start giving the stipend beforehand. It only starts in October. So the initial, I guess, few weeks or when you come here, you might have to, make your first accommodation payment by yourself or be able to cover the few weeks. But it starts in October, and then sort of you can, backdate your payments and work it out that way.
For the open, it starts before, so 1 month before. Yeah.
Perfect. That's it. It seems. Again, if anyone has any questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, we will end the session. You can also just raise your hand and ask your questions directly to the speakers if that's more helpful. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, then I guess we'll end the session. We're also already way past the 1 hour
Yeah.
time limit, so that's fine. But thank you so much, Hanzala, Shreya, and Abdullah, for joining us today, and for honestly waking up very early in the morning on a weekend. I really do appreciate it. Thank you everyone who joined us today. Just note that this session was recorded, so if you missed any part or joined late, you can watch a recording of the session on our YouTube channel. I'll just share the link here. Yeah. And the recording of the ESRC PhD studentship is also already on the YouTube channel. I've sent a link to that in case you want to have a look at that recording as well. Yeah, and with that, I will end the session now. Again, once again, Hanzala, Shreya, Abdullah, thank you. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a nice rest of your weekend.
Best of luck, everyone.
Yes, good luck.
Best of luck, everyone, and thank you so much, Misbah, for the opportunity. It was really great to just share everything.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.